All right, everybody, let's get started. This will also be recorded as well. So welcome to our second member town hall, where we're walking through information for all of our members and committers regarding the migration of the Eclipse Foundation to become a Belgian-based nonprofit open source foundation. So this town hall is intended to provide an update to everyone on our transition and really go through what changes are being made, what's the impact on you, our members, what actions do we require from you as our members, and where can you find out more information. And we are hoping that there will be questions. We're looking forward to doing a Q&A at the end of this. We are going to hold the questions until the end, just to sort of help with the flow and help with the quality of the recording. But while we're talking through here, if you have any questions, you can either put them right in the Crowdcast chat box, or send them out on Twitter to Eclipse Foundation, and we have folks monitoring both of those channels. So back in May 12th, 2020, we announced that the Eclipse Foundation is moving to Europe. And so we are going to become a European-based organization based in Brussels, Belgium. The type of organization is called, in English, it's an International Nonprofit Association. The French translation initials is AISBL. I won't reveal how bad my French is by attempting to pronounce that. But the intent is to grow the worldwide Eclipse ecosystem and advance our open source projects, and really focusing on being a global institution. So why are we doing this? 70% of our paying members are based in Europe. 70% of our committers and developers are based in Europe. 1/3 of our staff is already based in Europe. Based on those numbers, we already are the largest open source foundation in Europe. We came to recognize that late last year. In addition to the above, we've been operating a subsidiary in Europe for 7 years, so we have a number of years of experience in being operational in Europe. And we also are heavily engaged in a number of European research programs, and that engagement is successful and well regarded. As we were sort of doing our strategic research led up to this decision, we came to the conclusion that Europe requires an open source foundation of international reach and reputation. There is a number of different government-led and industry-led initiatives that are occurring in Europe. Things like digital sovereignty, sovereign cloud, citizen privacy, interest in technologies like AI and edge. All of these have open source components. And so Europe needs some sort of open source foundation of international reach and reputation. And given that we already were the largest open source foundation in Europe, we decided that we would take the opportunity to seize the moment and fulfill this requirement for Europe. It's important to note that this transition to Europe has been backed unanimously by all of the strategic members of the foundation. In particular, it's been every vote at the board of directors on this topic has been unanimous. So in addition to our strategic members, the elected members representing our solutions members and our committer members are also unanimously in favor of this transition. So what are the key steps that we need to go through in order to make this a reality? So the first thing is we have to create a new Belgian international not-for-profit. And so we have filed the incorporation documents with the Belgian authorities. We did that just a little over a month ago. As part of that, there's new bylaws and new membership agreement. And it's important to note that the Belgian bylaws stipulate that we will continue to comply with the 501c6 requirements as a US nonprofit as well. So we are undertaking to meet the requirements in law of being both a Belgian nonprofit and a US nonprofit. And to actually become operational, we have to wait for a royal decree, which is the sort of the government process that they use in Belgium to create a nonprofit corporation. We do expect this process to be finalized in early to mid-October, resulting in our new corporation, Eclipse Foundation AISBL. So in addition to creating the Belgian international nonprofit, we also have to update the existing US-based Eclipse Foundation governance to align with the Belgian organization. So this requires revisions to the bylaws and the membership agreement, which have now been approved by the board, and we now need the approval of all of our members, which includes our committers. So you should have noticed emails talking about and providing you voting credentials to cast your vote in support of this reorganization. Subsequent to that, we are going to transition all of our members from the Eclipse Foundation US to Eclipse Foundation Belgium. And so as part of that, members are going to be asked to execute new membership agreements, working group participation agreements, and committer agreements. So a couple of key changes in governance. The first one is fee structure. And so these have been approved by the board of directors. And it's important to note that this is unanimously approved by the strategic members who pay the largest dues. And the main change, to summarize, the change is that we are going to be restating our dues from US dollars to euros. So if your fee is currently $20,000, it will, starting October 1st, it will be 20,000 euros. We do realize that, that this is an increase in fees, and as a result, this fee increase will be discounted by 10% from the period of October 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2021 for all existing members who are renewing their membership with the Eclipse Foundation. Both the US and Belgium will have identical fee structures. So it's not like you can have some sort of arbitrage between which organizations you are a member of. It's important to note that there aren't going to be any changes in working group fees associated with this transition to Europe. So these will all remain in US dollars for the time being. Individual working groups may revisit their fee structures, including currency and beginning in 2021, but this is not something, this is a choice that they will be making, not something that that we are going to be mandating on a working group level. So each working group is free to decide which currency they want to state their participation fees in. It's important to note that this is the first fee increase or even a fee change in more than a decade. And it really is necessary to state our dues in euros if we are going to be a European-based organization. Next big change is membership classes. So we are streamlining and realigning the membership classes. So currently today there's two different levels of strategic membership: strategic developer, strategic consumer. In the future, it's just going to be one strategic membership. We've removed the enterprise class of members and we've renamed solutions to contributing. Because we really believe that that is sort of a better captures what that class of member is doing in their participation in the Eclipse Foundation. The remaining classes of membership, associate and committer, remain the same name, same meaning, so there's no changes there. So additional key changes in governance. First thing to note is under Belgian law, they generally refer to a general assembly as opposed to the membership at large, which is the term that we've been using in the US. But the General Assembly has a number of key rights that are baked into Belgian law that is significantly different than what we have in the past in the US. So first, they have to approve the changes to the bylaws and the membership agreement. That has been the case since day one. But in addition to that, they have approval rights on the annual budget, the selection of the auditor, the acceptance of the audited financial statements, even the remuneration of the auditors is something that is to be approved by the General Assembly. And ratify the appointments of board members also has to be done by the General Assembly. So as a result, we do anticipate in having more frequent meetings of the General Assembly. We think that we're going to need to have at least 2 meetings per year rather than the one annual general meeting that we've had that was aligned with EclipseCon. And we do expect that these meetings are going to be done virtually or a combination of physical and virtual. And there are provisions under Belgian law to enable proxy votes in advance of a General Assembly meeting. And we're certainly going to be encouraging folks to provide those in advance of the meeting, assuming that that they don't feel that there's discussion required or so forth. So rights and benefits, re-governance. So, similar to what we've had before, the representation on the board is each strategic member gets to appoint someone from the board. The contributing members and the committee members will have elected representatives on the board exactly as they always have, including the formula that says that for each 5 additional strategic members, there's an additional contributing representative and an additional committee representative. As we talked about, there's votes on the foundation budget and the under the contributing and the committers, both the elected representatives get to vote. In addition, contributing members gets to vote in the General Assembly. So same on, but the main point is the one on the bottom. Is like who gets to participate in the meetings of the General Assembly, and what and I just really want to call out that there is one significant change, is that committers are welcome to participate in the meetings and ask questions, but their participation in the General Assembly is non-voting. So the committer class of members has the same elected representation on the board as they always have. But going forward, they're not going to be voting as part of the General Assembly. And this is really because, as we sort of did the analysis, with the expanded role of the General Assembly that is mandated by Belgian law, it was just felt that it was inappropriate to have 1,800 committers voting on things like the budget, the audited financial statements, and so on. Partially is because most of them are definitely not interested, and also it made the quorum requirements far more difficult to achieve for each one of these ongoing votes of the General Assembly. So what are we changing in the U.S. bylaws? So we do assume, we have to assume that the two organizations, Belgium and U.S., are going to exist for some period of time. They're going to have separate board of directors, their own bylaws, their own policies, and we want to keep these organizations aligned. So one of the things that's important to note is that if you think of the core policies of the Eclipse Foundation, the IP policy, the antitrust policy, the development process, specification process, working group process, as of the moment that the Eclipse Foundation Belgium is created, those policies are going to be word for word identical between the US and Belgian organization. And that's really what is the mechanism by which we're going to enable seamless collaboration across whether you are a member or a committer with the US or the Belgium organization, you're still going to be able to participate in Eclipse working groups and Eclipse projects just the way you always have. But as time goes on, we have to make sure that the governance is set up in a way that we can keep these organizations aligned and keep these policies in sync. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is the Eclipse Foundation Belgium is going to become a member of the Eclipse Foundation US in a particular class of member called Strategic Foundation Member. And the Belgian organization will have the right to appoint seats on the US board. And the point of those seats on the US board is to ensure that these organizations remain in sync. And also to ensure governance continuity, we do expect that our strategic members, for example, are going to switch their membership from the US to the Belgian organization in fairly short order, and which is going to actually dramatically reduce the size of the board of the US organization. So we had to come up with a mechanism by which we would continue to have a functioning board. So we've done a lot of work along these lines to set this up. It's all been reviewed by nonprofit counsel in both Belgium and the US to make sure that we are supporting and protecting the nonprofit status of both organizations while meeting our strategic goals of enabling this transition and maintaining alignment between the two organizations for perhaps a significant period of time. So changes to the membership agreement. So starting in October, basically as soon as we receive the royal decree, we're going to be asking members to execute the new membership agreement with the Eclipse Foundation AISBL. However, the membership agreement in the US still needs to be modified to reflect the new changes in membership. And we've also made a significant effort to simplify and shorten the membership agreement. And so that is why you're being asked to vote in support of the new membership agreement. This new membership agreement does require both board approval, which is already done, as well as a vote of the membership at large, which is ongoing up until the end of September. So what's not changing? It's really important to note that the governance structure remains pretty much the same. And in particular, the elected representatives on the board for both the committer and contributing class of members remains exactly the same. I want to just reiterate, I say this every year as we begin the election process. We believe that those elected representatives on our board has been a great source of strength in the decision making at the board level. These seats are very, very important to the governance of the Eclipse Foundation, and we definitely wanted to continue to maintain those elected seats on our board. The elected representatives that were elected last year in the first quarter of, earlier this year in the first quarter of 2020, will remain on the board of the Eclipse Foundation AISBL until we held the elections in the first quarter of 2021. So the board is effectively the exact same set of people between the US and the Belgian entity. And so there's a few differences in how the committees are structured and how they report to the board. But it's generally, the governance is as absolutely as close as we could make it, given the slight differences in law and norms between the US and Belgium. In addition, something else that's not changing is fundamentally the organization. So the Eclipse projects and working groups are unaffected by the changes. This is enabled by having the same IP policy, antitrust policy, and the development specification and working group processes. The EMO, including the staff and the Architecture Council, remain the same. So all of the same people that you do work with on the Eclipse Foundation staff continue in their roles, doing exactly the same work that they always have. The rights and benefits of affiliated organizations, that's all the same. Existing policies, we did do some work earlier in 2020 to approve new versions of the IP policy and antitrust policy to make sure that they worked for under both US and Belgian law, as well as development process, spec process, and working group process. And as I said before, the staff remains the same. Roughly 2/3 of our staff is in Canada, 1/3 in Europe. And of course, we have one staff member, our conference queen, Ann Jacko, is our one employee in the US. So to enact the proposed changes to the Eclipse Foundation Inc. US bylaws and membership agreements, we need your help in the vote of the membership at large. So please, we urge you to cast your ballots. The faster we get to quorum, the sooner we can move on with this decision. And so your vote is important, and please cast your vote. If you haven't received a ballot and you think you should have, please contact emo@eclipsefoundation.org, and we will get that sorted out as quickly as possible. So there's some additional changes in governance documents. Beyond the membership agreement, we have our working group participation agreements and our committer agreements. Those need to be updated because we're changing the legal entity from Eclipse Foundation US to Eclipse Foundation AISBL. So we are going to be asking both our committers and our members to be updating their agreements as we do this transition. We can't say exactly when this is going to be started because it's really based on when we get the royal decree, but it will be basically as soon as possible. In addition, the contributor agreement will be updated to reference the AISBL, but we're not going to be invalidating the existing ECAs, so they will continue to be effective, and they will expire in their normal course of events. And when people renew, they'll be renewing with the Belgian entity. So what is the impact to you? So beginning August 31st, we asked all of our members to vote on the new US bylaws and the membership agreement. Beginning in October, all members are going to be asked to update their membership agreement and other documents, including the adjustments to the fees. As soon as the royal decree is issued and as renewals happen, we're going to be asking you to sign the new Belgian membership agreement and resign your membership in the existing US organization. At the same time, we'll be asking you to re-execute your MCCAs and any working group participation agreements. As we said before, dues are going to be stated in euros, and there will be a 10% discount for the first renewal. None of this applies to working group participation fees. Modulo the decisions of each of the steering committees of each of the working groups, those dues remain the same. For committer members, it's important to recognize that none of this is changing the Eclipse development process. The access to GitHub or the existing Eclipse Forge. You may be aware that we've added a new Forge based on GitLab, physically hosted on servers in Switzerland, and you're certainly welcome to start using that. But fundamentally, what you do as a committer is not changing. We are going to ask you to vote on the changes to the bylaw and membership agreement. And if you are an individual committer member, i.e. you signed the individual committer agreement, we are going to be asking you to execute a new Belgian membership agreement and a new Belgian individual committer agreement. If you're an employee or consultant of a member company and you're covered under what's called the member committer or contributor agreement, and this is a little over half of the committers at the Eclipse Foundation, we're going to be working with your employer to execute a new MCCA, and basically nothing is going to be required on your part. So that's good news for those folks. And your elected representatives on the Eclipse board will remain as they are today. So that's Ed Merckx, Danny Megert, Chris Anizik. So your elected committer reps on the board remain the same. So we have created quite an exhaustive FAQ, and we certainly encourage you to read that FAQ and ask us any questions. That's the URL there. So eclipse.org/Europe/AISBL_membership_FAQ.php. And if you have any questions after reading that, if you have any additional questions, you can certainly send an email to eclipse-europe@eclipse.org. So what's the timeline? So we're partially already we're about a month into this timeline with the vote, or sorry, a couple of weeks into the timeline with the vote that commenced on August 31st. The vote is going to continue until the 29th, and the new bylaws and membership agreement will go into effect as soon as practicable after the completion of the membership vote. October 1st, the new due structure stated in euros goes into effect for renewals for a year after that. So October 1st, 2020 to September 30, 2021, any renewals will receive a 10% discount from the quoted euro amount. And as soon as the royal decree, which legally establishes the Eclipse Foundation AISBL, we're going to be starting to contact our members and committers to update their agreements to the new Belgian entity. As you can imagine, this is a big job for our somewhat limited staff. So this is it's going to take some time for us to plow through all of these agreements and transactions with our members. So we hope that you are ready to join the Eclipse Foundation AISBL. We at the staff of the Eclipse Foundation and the board of directors are been working really hard on this for quite some time, and we're very excited about this transition. And so we invite you to learn more at eclipse.org/Europe. And if you have any questions about the membership aspects of this, by all means, please send us an email at membership@eclipse.org. So with that, I thank you, and we'll turn it over to questions.
Hey, Mike, we're just re-adding Paul. He dropped again, but we have one question. Actually, Paul's here now, so I'll let him go.
Yeah, just a question about, whether it matters, whether the membership and the change to Europe is dependent on whether you are a US-based entity or a European-based entity. So the answer, in general, we are asking all members, whether you're based in US, you're based in Europe, or in Asia, or anywhere, we're asking all members to make this move and to migrate your membership from the US to the Belgian organization. Yeah,
that's exactly right. But it's important to note that we are transitioning to becoming a European Belgian-based organization. The intent is that after some period of time, and I can't at this moment tell you how long that'll be, but the intent is that at some point in time, we will be winding up the US organization. So this is not we're going to keep both organizations around forever and a day. This is, we are moving to becoming a Belgian organization. And as part of this, we are going to be asking all of our members to move their membership over to Belgium.
I hope that answers the question. It's
Any other questions?
Are there any other questions? Feel free to fire away. We know there's a lot of complexity to it, but in terms of the specifics of the governance, but I think the principle is hopefully straightforward for folks. And the action that's required of our members is fairly straightforward.
All right. It's a quiet crowd today. Is somebody made sure that there's no questions on the Twitter feed?
Yeah, I've been looking, and there hasn't been any questions on Twitter.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, if there's no questions, again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us. It's really important we do acknowledge that this is a big change. There is some complexity here. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of the email addresses that we provided. We will do our very best to get them answered as quickly as we can. I also want to reiterate that we think this is an important move for the Eclipse Foundation. We do aspire to being a truly global institution as part of the broader open source ecosystem. We think this is a tremendous opportunity for the Eclipse Foundation, for our projects, our committers, and our members. And we're very excited about doing this and look forward to having the support of our members and our committers as we make this transition. So with that, thank you very much, and appreciate your time, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Sorry, there has been a question. Paul, you're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, Paul, you're on mute.
I'm gone, I think.
No, you're there. We can see you. What's the question?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not really sure why I'm not seeing the questions, but...
The question is, what happens to Eclipse GmbH?
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, now I see it. Thanks, Naji.
Yeah, great question.
Actually, so initially, absolutely nothing. So the Eclipse Foundation Europe GmbH is a wholly owned for-profit subsidiary of Eclipse Foundation US. And nothing is going to change about that for some period of time. We do expect that for example, most of our European employees are employees of the GmbH, and that is going to remain the case for some time. There's no real motivation to move them over to become directly employed by the AISBL for some period of time. Down the road, and by down the road, we're probably talking something in the order of a year, we would expect the ownership of the Eclipse Foundation Europe GmbH will be switched from the US organization to the Belgian organization. But there's a number of different legal and tax things we have to work through before we can make that happen. So that's why I expect it's going to be about a year. But fundamentally, it's the GmbH is going to stay in existence. It's going to remain the employer for all of our employees in Europe for the time being, for sure. It's going to remain the organization that organizes EclipseCon and is the producer of EclipseCon. So fundamentally, it's business as usual for the GmbH.
Yeah, it'll continue to be involved in the research projects too, the European research projects. So that's been a key role of that organization, and so that won't change either. Nope, great question.
All right. So, alrighty, perfect. Thanks, everybody. I think we're good, and we really appreciate your time. And with that, Hudson, I think we can wrap up.